Chapter 2. Echoes of Grief. The sterile chill of the morgue hit Detective Lena Walsh like a wall. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead drowned out the faint hum of voices from the corridor beyond. The room reeked of disinfectant, but it couldn't mask the cold, unyielding finality of death. Chris Webb's body lay on the steel table, covered by a white sheet. Lena stood at the doorway, her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. This wasn't the first time she'd been here, not the first time she'd faced a life cut short under suspicious circumstances, but this time felt different. "Detective Walsh," the coroner called softly, his voice tinged with weariness. "Are you ready?" Lena nodded, stepping forward with deliberate, measured steps. She shoved her hands into the pockets of her leather jacket to keep them from trembling. The coroner pulled back the sheet, revealing Chris's lifeless face. He didn't look like a star athlete anymore. He didn't look like a man whose name had been chanted by thousands just days ago. He looked small, fragile, like a boy she couldn't save. "Preliminary cause of death is blunt force trauma from the fall," the coroner said, his tone clinical. "Officially, it's being ruled an accident." "Officially," Lena repeated, her voice hollow. She scanned Chris's face, the bruising on his knuckles, the faint abrasions on his jawline. "And unofficially?" The coroner hesitated, his brow furrowing. "There are inconsistencies. The bruising suggests a struggle before the fall, nothing definitive yet, but it raises questions." Lena's chest tightened. Questions. Always questions, but never answers. She tore her gaze from Chris's face and turned to the coroner. "Do me a favor. Keep this quiet. If this gets out too soon—" "I understand," he said, covering Chris's body again. "But you'll need something solid if you want to make a case." She nodded, her thoughts already racing. Something solid. Something concrete. It was a tall order in this city, where truth was often buried under layers of lies and corruption. But Lena had made peace with tall orders a long time ago. By the time she returned to the precinct, the sun was rising, casting the city in a muted gray light. She could feel its weight, the same as always. Its crumbling buildings, its desperate people, its festering corruption. This city never changed. And yet, every day, she found herself fighting to make it better, even if just for a moment. Her desk was cluttered with files, a cup of cold coffee, and a framed photograph of her brother, Michael. She picked up the picture, tracing the edge of the frame with her thumb. He'd been smiling in the photo, his arm draped around her shoulder, his eyes bright with life. She set it down carefully, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. "Detective Walsh," a gruff voice interrupted. She looked up to see Captain Briggs standing by her desk. His face was lined with years of stress and late nights, and his expression was unreadable. "Briggs," she acknowledged. "In my office," he said, jerking his head toward the door. "Now." Lena followed him, bracing herself for whatever lecture or reprimand was coming. Inside, Briggs closed the door and gestured for her to sit. She stayed standing. "IA's breathing down our necks," he said, cutting straight to the point. "They're not happy with how you've been handling this case." "Handling it how?" Lena asked, folding her arms. Briggs sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're chasing ghosts, Walsh. Chris Webb's death is an accident. That's the official line. And IA doesn't want you stirring up trouble without proof." "Trouble?" Lena scoffed. "Chris Webb was a symbol for this city. If the Rossi family's involved—" "We don't know that," Briggs interrupted, his voice firm. "And until we do, you need to tread carefully." Lena clenched her fists at her sides. "Carefully doesn't get results." "Carefully keeps you on the force," Briggs shot back. "This isn't just about Chris Webb. You're too close to this, Lena. Everyone knows you've got a personal stake because of your brother." Her jaw tightened. "This has nothing to do with Michael." Briggs leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "Doesn't it? You think IA doesn't see the connection? They'll use it against you, Walsh. Don't give them the chance." She stared at him, her breath steady but her heart pounding. "I won't back off, Briggs. Not this time." Briggs sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Then you'd better be right." Because if you're wrong, Iowa will bury you. Later that night, Lena sat in her apartment, the cluttered space reflecting the chaos in her mind. Her walls were lined with case notes and photographs, a collage of connections that always seemed to lead back to the Rossi family. She had spent years chasing shadows, looking for the thread that would unravel their empire. But now, the shadows felt closer, darker. She opened Chris Webb's file, spreading the photographs across her desk. His championship victory, his smile, his broken body at the base of the building where he died. She stared at them until her vision blurred, until her frustration boiled over. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. She grabbed it, her heart skipping as she read the text. "You're digging in the wrong places. Leave it alone." No sender, no trace, just the threat. Lena's hands tightened around the phone. She deleted the message, but couldn't erase the anger it ignited. Whoever sent it was right about one thing. She was digging. And she wasn't going to stop until she unearthed the truth.